there is an abandoned resort on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, that has not had a single living guest in over 3 decades. The Coco Palms Resort. It used to be paradise. Tiki torches lining the walkways, coconut groves stretching as far as you could see, a lagoon so still it looked like glass. Then Hurricane Iniki came in 1992 and tore the place apart. But here is the thing that nobody talks about. Multiple attempts have been made to rebuild that resort. Every single one has failed. Investors pull out. Construction workers refuse to go back. Equipment breaks in ways that engineers cannot explain. And the locals, the ones who actually live on that island, they will tell you something very simple. They will tell you the land does not want anyone there. A film crew found that out the hard way. And what they captured on camera during their one night inside those ruins changed everything they believed about what is real and what is not. Before we get into this, I want to be upfront with you. What you are about to hear is a story, but it is built on a real place, a real history, and real events that the people of Kauai have known about for generations. I have changed names, I have changed certain details, but the place is real. The ruins are real, and the warnings that the locals give about that land, those are very, very real. So if you are listening to this late at night alone, maybe keep a light on. This one stays with you. Elena Marsh was 31 years old when she boarded a flight from Los Angeles to Lihue, Kauai, in the first week of June 2019. She was a documentary filmmaker, independent, small budget, the kind of filmmaker who did everything herself because she could not afford not to. She had a YouTube channel with about 40,000 subscribers where she posted short documentaries about abandoned places across the United States. Old hospitals, shuttered amusement parks, ghost towns in the desert, that kind of thing. Her videos did okay, not great. Not enough to quit her part-time bartending job, but okay. And she had been looking for something bigger, something that could break her through to the next level. Something with real history, real atmosphere, real weight behind it. That is when she found the Coco Palms Resort. She had been scrolling through old articles one night, a glass of wine on the desk beside her laptop, when she came across a photo essay about abandoned hotels. Most of them she had already heard of, but one of them stopped her cold. It was a photograph of a long concrete hallway, cracked and stained with decades of rain and mold. Vines crawled through the broken windows. The ceiling had partially collapsed, and through the gap you could see the sky. Gray clouds, palm trees bending in the wind, and at the far end of the hallway, barely visible in the shadows, there was a shape. It could have been a trick of the light. It could have been a piece of debris or a shadow cast by one of the trees outside. But it looked like a person, standing perfectly still, facing the camera. The caption beneath the photograph read, "Coco Palms Resort, Walua, Kauai, abandoned since 1992. Elena clicked on the article, and for the next 3 hours, she did not look away from her screen. The history of the Coco Palms Resort was fascinating. It opened in the 1950s under the vision of a woman named Lyle Guslander, a hotelier who had fallen in love with the coconut grove that stretched along the eastern coast of Kauai near the mouth of the Wailua River. The grove itself was ancient. Over 2,000 coconut palms, some of them planted by Hawaiian royalty centuries before any resort was ever dreamed of. The land was part of what the native Hawaiians called a wahipana, a storied place, a place of spiritual power. The Wailua River corridor was one of the most sacred regions in all of the Hawaiian Islands. It was where the Aili, the ruling chiefs, lived and governed. It was where heiau, sacred stone temples, were built for ceremonies that connected the living world to the world of spirits. And it was where certain rituals were performed that were so sacred, so serious, that commoners were forbidden from even setting foot on the ground. Lyle Guslander built her resort right on top of it, and for a while, it thrived. The Coco Palms became one of the most famous hotels in Hawaii. Celebrities came from all over the world. Frank Sinatra stayed there, Bing Crosby, and in 1961, Elvis Presley filmed Blue Hawaii on the grounds, including the iconic wedding scene by the lagoon. Every evening at sunset, a ceremony of torches was lit throughout the coconut grove, and conch shells were blown across the water. It was beautiful, it was magical, and it made a lot of people a lot of money. But there were always whispers. Staff members talked about hearing things at night. Footsteps in hallways that were supposed to be empty, doors that opened and closed on their own. Guests occasionally reported waking up in the middle of the night to find someone standing in their room, someone who was not there when they turned on the light. One former employee, in an interview Elena found buried deep in an old Kauai newspaper archive, described hearing chanting coming from the coconut grove after midnight, low rhythmic chanting in a language she did not understand. When she went to investigate, there was no one there. But the air was different, she said. It felt heavy. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm, thick and electric, except the sky was clear. Then came September 11th, 1992. Hurricane Iniki. It was the most powerful hurricane to hit the Hawaiian Islands in recorded history. Category 4. Sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. It made direct landfall on Kauai, and it devastated the island. The Coco Palms Resort was destroyed. Roofs ripped off. Walls collapsed. The coconut grove was shattered. Palms snapped like matchsticks. The lagoon filled with debris. And when the storm passed, what was left of the Coco Palms looked like a war zone. The resort never reopened, and that is the part of the story that always fascinated Elena. Because it was not for lack of trying. Over the next 27 years, multiple developers attempted to purchase and rebuild the Coco Palms Resort. Plans were drawn up. Millions of dollars were invested. Permits were filed, and every single time something went wrong. Funding fell through. Lawsuits appeared out of nowhere. Construction crews reported accidents that could not be explained. Equipment malfunctioned. Workers quit without giving reasons. One construction foreman, in a brief interview with a local news outlet, said simply that the site did not feel right. When pressed for details, he shook his head and said he did not want to talk about it anymore. The resort sat there, year after year, rotting, sinking into the earth, the jungle slowly consuming what was left. Vines wrapped around the concrete. Trees grew through the floors. Rain and humidity turned everything soft and black with mold, and people on the island started saying what the native Hawaiians had always known, that the land was not meant for a resort, that the land remembered what it was, and that whatever lived in that ground, whatever energy had been there for centuries before the first tourist ever set foot on Kauai, it was not happy about what had been built on top of it. Elena read all of this in one sitting, and by the time she closed her laptop, she knew. This was her next project. She called Jake Reeves the next morning. Jake was her camera operator. He was 28, laid back, a surfer from San Diego who had stumbled into filmmaking almost by accident. He was good with the camera, steady hands, a natural eye for composition, and more importantly, he was cheap. He worked for travel expenses, a cut of any ad revenue, and the promise that he could surf whatever coast they happened to be near. But Elena told him they were going to Kauai. He said yes before she even finished the sentence. The third member of the team was Marcus Cole. Marcus was the sound guy. He was 35, a former audio engineer who had worked in the music industry before burning out and moving into freelance documentary work. He was quiet, meticulous, the kind of person who noticed things other people missed. He had a way of tilting his head slightly when he was listening to something, like a dog picking up a frequency that human ears were not supposed to hear. Elena trusted him completely. If there was something to hear at the Coco Palms Resort, Marcus would hear it. They flew out on June 4, 2019. The flight from LA to Lihua was about 5.5 hours. Elena spent most of it going over her research notes. She had compiled everything she could find about the resort, the hurricane, the failed rebuilding attempts, and the history of the land itself. She had pages and pages of material, enough for a feature-length documentary, easily. But she was planning something smaller, a 30 to 40-minute piece, atmospheric, moody, heavy on visuals. She wanted to walk through the ruins at different times of day, capture the way the light moved through the broken buildings, interview a few locals, and piece it all together with narration. She did not believe in ghosts. She wanted to be clear about that later, when she told this story. She did not believe in spirits or curses or anything supernatural. She believed in history. She believed in the power of place. She believed that certain locations carried an emotional weight because of what had happened there, and that weight could affect people psychologically. That was all. There was nothing mystical about it. It was just how the human brain worked. You walk into an old abandoned building. Your brain starts filling in the gaps. It starts inventing threats. It is a survival mechanism, nothing more. That is what she believed when she got on the plane. That is not what she believed when she got off the island. They landed in Lihue in the early afternoon. The airport was small, open air, the kind of place where you could smell the flowers before you even stepped off the jet bridge. The air was warm and thick with humidity. Jake immediately started talking about waves. Marcus immediately started adjusting his equipment. Elena rented a Jeep, loaded the gear, and drove north along the coast toward Wailawa. The drive was beautiful. That is something Elena always emphasized when she told this story later. She wanted people to understand that Kauai is not a dark place. It is not some gloomy, fog-covered island from a horror movie. It is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Green mountains rising straight out of the ocean. Waterfalls cascading down cliff faces so steep they look impossible. Red dirt roads winding through fields of sugarcane and taro. The air smells like plumeria and salt. The light is golden, soft, the kind of light that makes everything look like a painting. And that is what makes what happened so much worse. Because it happened in paradise. They checked into a small hotel in Kauai, about 10 minutes north of Waldua. 2 rooms, nothing fancy. Elena spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls. She had reached out to several locals before the trip, trying to arrange interviews. Most of them had agreed to talk on camera. One woman, a cultural practitioner named Lalani Kama, had agreed to meet Elena at a coffee shop in Wailua the following morning. But there was one person Elena had not been able to reach, an elderly man named William Kilaw. He was 83 years old. He had been born in Waiwa and had lived there his entire life. He had worked at the Coco Palms Resort as a groundskeeper from 1968 until the hurricane destroyed it in 1992. According to several people Elena had spoken with, William knew more about the resort and the land it sat on than anyone else alive. But when Elena called his number, no one answered. When she asked around, people were polite but vague. He keeps to himself, they said. He does not talk to outsiders about the Coco Palms. Not anymore. Elena made a note to try again. Then she went to bed. She did not sleep well that first night. She told herself it was jet lag. The time difference between Los Angeles and Hawaii was 3 hours, and her body had not adjusted. She lay in the dark, listening to the sound of the rain on the roof, the occasional car passing on the highway outside, and something else. Something she could not quite identify, a low, distant sound, almost like humming. It was so faint she was not even sure it was real. It could have been the air conditioning. It could have been the wind moving through the trees. It could have been nothing. She rolled over and closed her eyes. At 3017 in the morning, she woke up. Not gradually, the way you normally wake up in the middle of the night. She woke up all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes were open. Her body was rigid. And she had the absolute, unmistakable feeling that someone was standing in the corner of her room. She did not move. She did not breathe. She lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in her body screaming at her to look. But she did not look. She could not, because some part of her, some deep, primal part that existed before language, before logic, before anything resembling rational thought, that part of her knew that if she looked, she would see something, and she was not ready to see it. The feeling lasted for maybe 30 seconds. Then it was gone, like a cloud passing in front of the sun and then moving on. The room felt normal again. The air felt lighter. And Elena exhaled slowly, sat up in bed, and turned on the lamp. The room was empty. She checked the door. It was locked. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the window. Closed. She stood there for a moment, her hand on the curtain, looking out at the parking lot below. Rain. Street lights. A stray cat walking along the curb. Nothing unusual. Nothing wrong. She went back to bed. But she did not turn off the lamp, and she did not sleep again until the sun came up. The next morning, she did not mention it to Jake or Marcus. There was nothing to mention. She had woken up in an unfamiliar room in the middle of the night and gotten spooked. That was all. It happened to everyone. It meant nothing. They met Leilani Kama at a small coffee shop near the Wailua River at 9 in the morning. Leilani was in her mid-50s, soft-spoken with long dark hair, streaked with silver. She wore a simple floral dress and a carved bone pendant in the shape of a fishhook around her neck. She greeted Elena with a warm handshake and a careful studying look that made Elena feel like she was being measured in some way she did not understand. They sat at a table outside under a wide umbrella. Jake set up the camera. Marcus clipped a lapel mic to Leilani's dress, and Elena began asking questions. Leilani spoke slowly and deliberately. She talked about the history of the Wailua River corridor, how it was one of the most significant spiritual sites in all of Polynesia, how the Alii, the chiefs, had chosen that land specifically because of its mana, its spiritual power. She talked about the Heiwo, the temples that once lined the riverbank. Some of them were still there, she said. Overgrown, forgotten by tourists, but still there, still holding what they were built to hold. Elena asked about the Coco Palms Resort. Leilani paused. She looked down at her coffee. Then she looked at Elena with an expression that was not hostile, but was very, very serious. That resort was built on a coconut grove that was planted by the Ali, she said. That grove was not decorative. It was functional. It served a spiritual purpose. The palms were planted in specific patterns for specific reasons. They marked boundaries. They marked pathways. They marked places where certain kinds of energy moved through the land. She paused again. When the resort was built, those patterns were disrupted. Some of the palms were removed to make room for buildings. Others were rearranged for aesthetics. The developers did not understand what they were doing. Or maybe they did not care, but they broke something. They interrupted something that had been in place for a very long time. Elena asked what she meant by that. Leilani looked at her for a long moment. There are things that live in the land, she said. Not ghosts. Not the way you think of ghosts. Something older than that. Something that was here before the Hawaiians. Before the Polynesians. Before anyone. The Hawaiians understood it. They built their ceremonies around it. They maintained a relationship with it. A balance. When the resort was built, that balance was broken. And when the hurricane came, it was not just a storm. It was a correction. Marcus, who had been sitting quietly off to the side with his headphones on, monitoring the audio levels, looked up at that. He had a strange expression on his face. Not fear, exactly. More like recognition. Like he had heard something in Leilani's voice that confirmed something he had already been feeling. Elena noticed but did not ask him about it. Not yet. She asked Leilani if she had ever been inside the resort ruins. No, Leilani said, and I would not go. Why not? Leilani set her coffee down carefully. Because that place is not empty, she said. It has not been empty since the storm. Something moved back in when the people moved out. Something that had been waiting, and it does not want to be disturbed. She looked directly into the camera when she said the next part, directly into the lens, as if she were speaking not to Elena, but to whoever would eventually watch this footage. If you go in there, she said, do not go at night, and whatever you do not take anything. Do not move anything. Do not touch the stones. There are stones in there, old stones, stones that were part of the heiau before the resort was built. They were moved. They were used as decoration, as garden borders, as stepping stones. That was a terrible thing. And if you touch them, if you disturb them further, you will bring something home with you, something you cannot get rid of. The interview lasted another 40 minutes, but those words hung in the air for the rest of the day. Even Jake, who was the most laid-back person Elena had ever met, was quieter than usual on the drive back to the hotel. That afternoon, Elena drove to the Coco Palms Resort for the first time, just to look, just to get a sense of the place before they went in with the cameras. The resort sat on the east side of Kuhio Highway, just south of the Wailua River. You could see it from the road, or rather, you could see what was left of it. The main building was a long, low structure, 2 stories in some places, that stretched along the highway behind a wall of overgrown vegetation. The parking lot was cracked and buckled, weeds pushing through every seam. A chain-link fence surrounded part of the property. but it was rusted and bent in places. No trespassing signs were posted every 50 feet or so. Their letters faded almost to nothing by years of sun and rain. Elena pulled the Jeep over on the shoulder and got out. She stood on the side of the road and looked at the resort. The afternoon sun was still high, and the light was warm and golden. But even in full daylight, the Coco Palms looked wrong. That was the only word for it. Wrong. Like a wound in the landscape that had never healed. The buildings were gray and black with mold. The roofs had collapsed in several places. Trees and vines had invaded every opening, every crack, every gap in the walls. It looked like the jungle was trying to swallow the resort whole. And it was winning, but it was not the decay that bothered Elena. She had been to dozens of abandoned places. Decay was normal. Decay was expected. What bothered her was the stillness. There was no wind, no birdsong, no insects buzzing. The air around the resort was completely, utterly still, as if the normal sounds of the world stopped at the property line and did not cross over. She stood there for maybe 3 minutes. Then she felt it. It started as a tingling at the base of her skull, a prickling sensation, like static electricity, that spread slowly down her spine. Her skin tightened. The hair on her forearms stood up. And deep in her chest, in a place she could not name, she felt something shift. A heaviness. A pressure, as if the air itself had become denser, as if gravity had increased by some small but perceptible amount. And then, from somewhere inside the resort, she heard it. A sound. Low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. She took a step back, then another. She did not take her eyes off the building. The sound continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. The stillness returned. The normal sounds of the world crept back in. A car passed on the highway behind her. A bird called from somewhere in the distance. Elena got back in the Jeep. She sat there for a long time, her hands on the steering wheel, staring at the resort through the windshield. She was not afraid. Not exactly. She was something worse than afraid. She was fascinated, and that fascination felt like a hook in her chest, pulling her forward, pulling her toward those ruins with a force that was not entirely her own. She drove back to the hotel. That evening, the three of them sat in Elena's room and planned their approach. They would go into the resort the following night. Elena had not been able to get official permission from the property owners, a development company based on the mainland that had purchased the site years ago and done nothing with it. Her emails had gone unanswered. Her phone calls had been redirected to voicemail boxes that were full, so they would go without permission. Jake did not love the idea. He pointed out that trespassing charges in Hawaii were not something he wanted on his record. Marcus said nothing. He sat on the edge of the bed with his headphones around his neck, running his fingers along the cable of his shotgun microphone, his eyes distant. Elena made her case. The footage would be worth it. The story was too good to pass up. They would be in and out in a few hours. No one would know. Jake sighed and said fine. Marcus looked up and said something that Elena would replay in her mind 1,000 times in the months that followed. "I have been hearing something since we got here," he said. "In my headphones, when I play back the ambient audio I have been recording around the island. There is a frequency underneath everything, very low. Below the threshold of normal hearing mostly. But it is there, constant, and it gets louder the closer we get to that resort." Elena asked him what he meant. "I mean, there is a sound coming from that place," Marcus said. "A sound that should not be there. It is not mechanical. It is not environmental. I have never heard anything like it. It sounds like the earth is humming." The room was quiet for a moment. "All the more reason to go," Elena said. She said it with confidence. She said it like she was not scared. But later, when she was alone, she sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked and her back against the wall, and she pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. Because the truth was, she was terrified, not of ghosts, not of spirits. She was terrified of how badly she wanted to go inside that resort. She was terrified of the pull she felt, the hook in her chest. The way the thought of those ruins filled her mind like water filling a glass, rising higher and higher until there was no room for anything else. She thought about her brother. She had not thought about him in weeks, which was unusual. His name was Daniel. He was 3 years younger than her. He had drowned in a lake in Northern California when he was 19. Elena had been there. She had been on the shore. She had watched him go under and not come back up. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. That was 6 years ago. And since then, Elena had not been the same person. She functioned. She worked. She made her documentaries. But there was a hollow space inside her that nothing could fill, a silence where her brother's voice used to be. And sometimes, in her worst moments, she felt like she was the one who had drowned, like she was the one trapped under the water, looking up at the surface, watching the light get farther and farther away. She did not know why she was thinking about Daniel now, but she was, and she could not stop. The next day, June 6th, they spent the morning filming B-roll around the island. The coastline, the mountains, the Wailoa River. Elena wanted to establish the beauty of Kauai before she showed the horror of the resort. Contrast, light before dark. In the afternoon, she tried calling William Kilaha again. This time someone answered. It was not William. It was a woman. His granddaughter, she said. Her name was Mahina. She was polite but firm. Her grandfather did not give interviews. He did not talk about the Coco Palms. Not to reporters, not to filmmakers, not to anyone. Elena explained that she was making a documentary, that she wanted to tell the story respectfully, that she wanted to honor the history of the land and the people who lived there. There was a long pause. My grandfather worked at that resort for 24 years, Mahina said. He was there when they built it. He was there when the hurricane destroyed it. And he has not been the same since. He has nightmares, every night, for 27 years. Every single night, he wakes up screaming. He says they are calling him back. He says they want him to come back to the grove. Elena asked who they were. Another pause, longer this time. He will not say. He has never said. He just says, they. And then he stops talking and stares at the wall for hours. Mahina told Elena not to call again. Then she hung up. Elena sat in the Jeep for a long time after that call. The sun was going down. The sky over the ocean was turning orange and pink, and the palm trees along the highway were swaying gently in the evening breeze. It was beautiful. It was peaceful, and Elena felt a cold, sick dread settling into her stomach like a stone. She almost called it off. She almost drove back to the hotel and told Jake and Marcus that they were done, that she had enough footage, that they could go home. But she did not, because the hook was still there, in her chest, pulling. They left the hotel at 11 o'clock that night. The plan was to arrive at the resort around 11:30, when the highway would be empty and the chances of being seen were lowest. They would park the Jeep down the road, walk into a gap in the fence that Elena had spotted during her visit the day before, and spend 3 to 4 hours inside the ruins. Film everything, record everything, get out before sunrise. The drive took 10 minutes. The highway was empty. The sky was overcast, no moon, no stars, just a thick blanket of clouds that seemed to press down on the island like a lid. The air was warm and humid, and the windshield kept fogging up. Elena drove with the headlights on low, watching the road, watching the tree line, watching for any sign of movement. They parked in a small gravel turnout about 200 yards south of the resort. They geared up in silence. Jake had his camera, a Sony FS7 with a mounted LED light. Marcus had his audio rig, a sound devices recorder, a shotgun mic, and a pair of reference headphones. Elena had a handheld flashlight and a GoPro strapped to her chest for backup footage. They walked along the shoulder of the highway until they reached the fence. The gap was right where Elena remembered it, a section of chain link that had been bent back by wind or time or someone who had been there before them. They squeezed through one at a time, Jake first, then Elena, then Marcus. And just like that, they were on the grounds of the Coco Palms Resort. The first thing Elena noticed was the silence. It hit her like a wall. On the highway there had been the normal sounds of night, frogs, insects, the distant hiss of surf. But inside the fence there was nothing. Absolute, total silence, as if someone had pressed mute on the entire world. The second thing she noticed was the smell. It was not the smell of decay, not the mold and rot she had expected. It was something else, something sweet and heavy, like flowers. Like 100 lace piled on top of each other, their fragrance so concentrated it was almost suffocating. And underneath that sweetness, something else, something darker, something that reminded her of the way the air smells right before lightning strikes. Jake turned on his camera light. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on the first building. It was a single-story structure, maybe 60 feet long, its roof completely gone. The walls were standing, but barely. Black mold covered every surface. Vines as thick as Elena's wrist crawled up the walls and disappeared over the top. Through the empty window frames, she could see more darkness. Deeper darkness, the kind of darkness that seemed to have weight and texture, that seemed to press against the openings like something trying to get out. "You getting this?" Elena whispered to Jake. Jake nodded. His face was pale in the reflected light of the camera. He did not look scared. He looked focused, professional, but Elena could see his jaw clenching and unclenching, a nervous habit he had that he probably did not even know about. Marcus had his headphones on. He was holding the shotgun mic out in front of him like a weapon, slowly panning it left and right. His eyes were closed. He was listening. After a moment, he opened his eyes. "It is louder here," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That frequency I told you about, it is much louder here. It is coming from everywhere." Elena felt the hair on her arms stand up. She looked at the building in front of them. She looked at the coconut grove stretching away into the darkness beyond it. And she made a decision. "Let's go in," she said. They walked forward, through the parking lot, past a collapsed carport, through a gap in the wall that might have once been a doorway, and into the Coco Palms Resort. The interior was worse than the exterior. The floors were covered in debris, broken concrete, fallen ceiling tiles, shattered glass, rotting furniture. Water stains ran down every wall in long dark streaks that looked like tear tracks. The air was thick and wet, and every breath felt like drinking. Their footsteps echoed in ways that did not make sense, bouncing off walls that should have absorbed the sound, coming back to them from directions that seemed wrong. Elena led the way. Jake followed with the camera. Marcus brought up the rear, his microphone sweeping the space like a radar dish. They moved slowly, carefully, stepping over obstacles, ducking under collapsed beams, squeezing through narrow gaps between walls that had shifted off their foundations. They were in what appeared to be the main lobby, or what was left of it. The front desk was still there, a long curved counter made of koa wood, now warped and split with moisture. Behind it a wall of pigeonholes where room keys had once been stored. Most of them were empty. But in one, near the top right corner, there was something. Elena shined her flashlight on it. It was a key. An actual room key still hanging on its hook after 27 years. The tag attached to it was so faded she could barely read it. But she could make out two numbers. Room 14. She reached for it. And then Marcus grabbed her arm. "Don't," he said. She looked at him. His face was tight. His eyes were wide. In the pale light of the flashlight, she could see that he was sweating. Not the normal sweat of a warm Hawaiian night. This was cold sweat. Fear sweat. It was running down his temples in thin lines. "What?" she said. Marcus did not answer right away. He was listening. His head was tilted at that angle she knew so well. The angle that meant he was picking up something that no one else could hear. "There is someone in this building," he said. Elena felt her stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" "In my headphones, I can hear movement. Footsteps, very faint, very slow, coming from somewhere above us." They all looked up. The ceiling above the lobby was partially intact. A second floor. Dark. Silent. No visible movement. "It could be an animal," Jake said. "A cat. A rat. Something." Marcus shook his head slowly. "It is not an animal," he said. "The footsteps are bipedal. 2 feet. Regular rhythm. Human gait. Someone is walking up there." The three of them stood in the ruined lobby of the Coco Palms Resort in the dead of night, on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and listened. Elena could not hear anything. Jake could not hear anything, but Marcus could, and the look on his face told Elena everything she needed to know. He was not guessing. He was not speculating. He could hear it, clear as day. Something was up there. Something was walking. And it was getting closer. Elena opened her mouth to speak, to say they should leave, to say this was enough. They had enough footage, enough material. They could go home now. But before she could say a word, every single thing changed. From somewhere deep inside the resort, from somewhere far beyond the lobby, beyond the hallways, beyond the collapsed wings and flooded corridors, a sound rose up. Not footsteps, not breathing, not humming. A voice, low, mournful, impossibly old. It was singing, and Elena recognized the melody. It was the lullaby her mother used to sing to Daniel, the lullaby she had sung to her baby brother every night before he went to sleep. The lullaby that no one else in the world knew, because her mother had made it up. Her mother had composed it herself, humming it softly in the dark of Daniel's bedroom, a melody that existed nowhere else, in no recording, in no memory but Elena's own. And it was coming from inside the Coco Palms Resort. Elena's flashlight slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. The beam spun wildly across the walls, the ceiling, the debris-strewn floor, casting shadows that leaped and twisted like living things. And in the split second before the light settled, Elena saw something in the hallway beyond the lobby. A figure, standing in the darkness, small, the size of a child. Then the light steadied, and the hallway was empty. But the singing continued, and somewhere above them the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Elena had ever heard. Elena did not move. She stood in the ruined lobby of the Coco Palms Resort, with her flashlight on the floor and her brother's lullaby filling the air around her. And she did not move. She could not. Her body had locked. Every muscle, every joint, every tendon had seized at once, as if her nervous system had received a command from somewhere deeper than her conscious mind, somewhere older, somewhere that understood what was happening even if she did not. The lullaby continued, soft, distant, coming from somewhere deep inside the building. The melody was exact. Every note, every pause, every place where her mother's voice used to catch slightly, the way it always did on the third phrase, where the melody dipped low before climbing again. It was perfect. It was impossible. Jake was saying something. She could hear his voice, but the words were not reaching her. They were just sounds, shapes in the air. She could see his mouth moving in the peripheral glow of the camera light. He was looking at her. He was reaching for her shoulder. But she could not respond. She was somewhere else. She was standing on the shore of a lake in Northern California, watching the water where her brother had gone under, watching the surface settle, watching the ripples fade to nothing. Then Marcus did something that snapped her back. He pulled his headphones off and threw them. Not gently, he ripped them from his head and hurled them across the lobby. They hit the wall and clattered to the ground, and the sound of it, sharp, real, physical, broke through the fog in Elena's mind like a hand through glass. She blinked. She looked at Marcus. His face was white, not pale. White. The color of paper. The color of bone. His hands were shaking, not trembling. Shaking. Full body uncontrollable shaking that started in his fingers and ran up his arms and into his chest. He was breathing in short, ragged bursts, his mouth open, his eyes fixed on something that Elena could not see. "Marcus," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Thin. Far away. "Marcus, what is it?" He did not answer. He was staring at the far corner of the lobby, where the darkness was thickest, where the camera light did not reach. He was staring at it the way you stare at something that should not be there, something that your brain is trying to process and failing. "Marcus." He looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was not his own. It was small. It was the voice of a child. "They know we are here," he said. And then the lullaby stopped. The silence that rushed in to fill the space was not natural silence. It was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something that occupied the frequency where sound should have been. A pressure, a weight on the eardrums. Elena felt it in her teeth, in her jaw, in the bones of her skull. It was like being underwater, like being held beneath the surface of something thick and dark and patient. Jake turned the camera toward the hallway where Elena had seen the figure. The beam of light swept across the corridor. Cracked walls, fallen ceiling tiles, a floor covered in debris and standing water. No figure, no movement, nothing. "We need to leave," Jake said. His voice was steady, but barely. He was holding the camera with both hands, and Elena could see his knuckles, bone white against the black housing. "Elena, we need to leave right now." She knew he was right. Every rational part of her brain was screaming the same thing. Leave, get out, walk back through the gap in the fence, get in the Jeep, drive to the hotel, get on a plane in the morning and never come back. But the hook was still there, deeper now, buried so deep in her chest that she could not tell where it ended, and she began. And it was pulling, not toward the exit, not toward the fence, the highway, the hotel, the airport. It was pulling her deeper, into the resort, into the dark, toward the singing. "I heard my brother," she said. Jake stared at her. "What?" "That song, that melody. It was a lullaby. My mother used to sing it to my brother Daniel when he was little. She made it up. Nobody else knows it. Nobody else has ever heard it, and it was coming from inside this building." Jake looked at Marcus. Marcus was still shaking. He had retrieved his headphones but was holding them at arm's length, as if they might bite him. "Elena," Jake said carefully, "your brother is gone. You told me about him. He passed away 6 years ago. Whatever you heard, it was not him. It was this place. It is doing something to us. I do not know what, but we need to get out." "I know my brother is gone," Elena said, and her voice cracked when she said it. Not dramatically, not like a movie. It cracked the way a real voice cracks when the person speaking is holding something inside them that is too heavy to carry and too painful to set down. "I know he is gone, Jake. I was there when he died. I watched it happen. But that was his song. And I need to know why." She picked up her flashlight. She pointed it down the hallway. "You can leave," she said. "Both of you. I will not hold it against you. But I am going down that hall." Jake closed his eyes. He took a breath. Then he opened them and raised the camera. "Then I am coming with you," he said. They both looked at Marcus. Marcus was standing very still. He had put his headphones back on. His head was tilted at that listening angle. His eyes were closed, and after a long moment, he opened them and nodded once. "The frequency is coming from that direction," he said, pointing down the hallway. "It is strongest there. Whatever is generating it, it is somewhere ahead of us." They moved forward. The hallway was long, much longer than it should have been. Elena had studied the floor plans of the Coco Palms Resort. She had memorized the layout. The main building was not that large. The hallway from the lobby to the guest wing should have been maybe 80 feet, but they walked for what felt like 5 minutes, and the hallway did not end. The walls kept going. The debris kept crunching under their feet. The darkness ahead kept retreating just beyond the reach of their lights, always the same distance away, always just out of sight. Elena told herself it was disorientation, an unfamiliar environment in the dark. No frame of reference. The brain plays tricks. Distances become unreliable. Time stretches, that was all. But she did not believe herself. The doors along the hallway were numbered. Most of the numbers had fallen off or faded beyond recognition, but some were still legible. Room 6, Room 8, Room 10. They were ascending, moving toward something. Room 12, Room 14. Elena stopped. The door to Room 14 was closed. Every other door in the hallway was open, hanging off its hinges or missing entirely. But Room 14 was closed. The door was intact. No rot, no mold, no water damage. It looked like it had been placed there yesterday. The wood was smooth and clean. The brass handle gleamed faintly in the flashlight beam, as if someone had recently polished it. The key. The key she had seen in the lobby, hanging in the pigeonhole. Room 14. She had not taken it. Marcus had stopped her. But now she was standing in front of the door, and it was closed, and the singing, which had been silent since the lobby, started again. Not from behind the door, from everywhere, from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor beneath their feet. The lullaby filled the hallway like water filling a pipe, rising, surrounding them, pressing in from all sides. And this time it was not just the melody. This time there were words. Elena could not make them out. They were just below the threshold of comprehension, like someone speaking in the next room. Close enough to hear the rhythm and cadence of speech, but too far to catch the individual words. She leaned closer to the door. The singing grew louder, clearer, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, she thought she could hear her mother's voice. Not a recording, not an echo. Her mother's actual voice. The specific texture of it. The warmth. The slight rasp that came from years of smoking before she quit. The way she softened certain consonants. The way she breathed between phrases. It was her. Elena put her hand on the door handle. It was warm. Not room temperature. Not the tropical warmth of a Hawaiian night. Warm like skin. Like living skin. Like she was touching someone's hand. She turned the handle. The door opened. The room beyond was not what she expected. It was not a destroyed hotel room. It was not a ruin. It was intact. Completely, impossibly intact. A bed, neatly made. White sheets pulled tight. A nightstand with a lamp, its shade slightly crooked. A dresser with a mirror. Curtains drawn across the window. A faint light filtering through them. The color of early morning, even though it was the middle of the night. The room smelled like plumeria, not the overwhelming sweetness they had encountered outside. This was gentle, domestic, the way a single flower in a vase smells in a small room. And on the bed, sitting cross-legged with his back against the headboard, was a boy. He was maybe 16. Dark hair, thin frame. He was wearing a t-shirt and board shorts, the kind you buy at a surf shop on the North Shore. His feet were bare. His skin was brown from the sun, and he was looking directly at Elena with an expression that she recognized instantly, because she had seen it 1,000 times before. It was the expression Daniel used to make when he was waiting for her, when she was late coming home, and he had been sitting in the living room, pretending not to worry. And then she would walk through the door, and he would look up with that face, that specific arrangement of relief and annoyance and love that only a younger sibling can produce. "Danny," Elena whispered. The boy on the bed smiled, and everything inside Elena came apart. 6 years. 6 years of grief. 6 years of therapy and medication and sleepless nights and the sound of water in her dreams. 6 years of carrying the weight of a moment she could not change. A hand she could not reach. A surface she could not break through. All of it, every single ounce of it, rose up inside her at once, and she felt her knees buckle. She took a step into the room. Jake grabbed her. He grabbed her arms so hard it left bruises that she would find the next day. 5 finger-shaped marks on her bicep that turned purple and yellow over the following week. He grabbed her and he pulled her back, physically dragged her away from the doorway, and she fought him. She fought him with everything she had. She twisted and pulled and pushed against his chest, and she was screaming. Not words, just sound. The raw, unformed sound of something breaking. "That is not your brother," Jake shouted. He had dropped the camera. It was on the floor, its light pointing at the ceiling, casting the hallway in harsh clinical white. "Elena, look at me. That is not Daniel. Look at it. Really look." She did not want to look. She wanted to go back to the room. She wanted to sit on that bed and hold her brother and never leave. She wanted to stay in that clean, warm, plumeria-scented room forever. But Jake's voice cut through. Not his words, his tone, the fear in it, the genuine, absolute terror. Jake, who never got scared. Jake, who surfed 20-foot waves and laughed about it. Jake, who had walked into this resort like it was just another job. Jake was terrified, and that terror was so real, so raw, that it reached through Elena's grief and grabbed hold of something essential. She looked. The room was not clean. The bed was not made. There were no white sheets. There were no curtains. There was no lamp, no dresser, no mirror. The room was a ruin, like everything else. The ceiling had collapsed. The floor was covered in broken concrete and standing water. Black mold crept up every wall. And there was no boy on the bed. There was no bed. There was no bed. There was only a shape, a dark, irregular shape in the center of the room, roughly the size of a person, made of something that Elena's flashlight could not quite resolve. It was not shadow. It was not solid. It was something in between, something that absorbed the light without reflecting it, something that existed in a space between seeing and not seeing, between real and not real. And it was moving, slowly, rhythmically, rising and falling, breathing. Elena stopped fighting. She went limp in Jake's grip. She stared at the shape in the room, and the shape stared back. She knew it was staring back because she could feel it, not with her eyes. It was something deeper, something in her bones, in her marrow, in the oldest, most primitive part of her brain. She could feel its attention on her like a physical force, like a beam of heat, like the sun focused through a magnifying glass. And then Marcus screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pain. Elena spun around. Marcus was on his knees in the hallway, his headphones still on, his hands pressed against the sides of his head. His mouth was open, his eyes were squeezed shut, and he was screaming like something was tearing him apart from the inside. Elena ran to him. She grabbed his headphones and pulled them off his head. The moment they came free, she heard it. Even through the tiny speakers of the headphones, even at arm's length, she heard it. A sound so low and so loud that it vibrated in her chest. Not the hum Marcus had described earlier, something else. Something that sounded like 1,000 voices speaking at once in a language she did not recognize, overlapping and interweaving, rising and falling in patterns that were almost musical, but not quite. Almost words, but not quite. Almost human, but not quite. She dropped the headphones. The sound stopped, or rather, it retreated. Back below the threshold of hearing. Back into the walls, the floor, the ground beneath the building. Marcus was gasping. Tears were streaming down his face. He looked up at Elena, and his expression was one she had never seen before. Not fear, not pain. Understanding. Terrible, unwanted understanding. They are not ghosts, he said. His voice was raw, shredded by the scream. They are not dead people. They are not spirits. They are something else. They have been here since before the Hawaiians, since before anyone. They live in the land, in the rock, in the water, and we are standing in the middle of their home. He grabbed Elena's arm. And they are angry, he said. Not at us, at what was built here, at what was done to this place. They have been angry for 70 years, and they do not know the difference between us and the people who built the resort. To them, we are all the same. We are all trespassers. The hallway shifted. Not physically. The walls did not move. The floor did not tilt. But something changed. The quality of the darkness changed. It became thicker, heavier. The air pressure increased. Elena's ears popped. Jake made a sound, a grunt of discomfort, and pressed his palm against the side of his head. And the temperature dropped. Not gradually. Instantly. One moment the air was warm and humid. The next, it was cold. So cold that Elena could see her breath. In Hawaii, in June. She could see her breath. Run, she said. They ran. Back down the hallway. Past room 12. Past room 12. Past room 10. Past room 8. The doors they had passed on the way in were no longer open. They were closed. Every single one of them. Closed and sealed, as if the hallway had rearranged itself while they were not looking. And behind each door, Elena could hear something. Movement. Rustling. The sound of someone getting up from a bed. The sound of feet touching a floor. The sound of hands reaching for a handle. They did not stop. They ran through the lobby. Past the front desk. Past the pigeonhole where the key to room 14 still hung on its hook. Through the gap in the wall. Out into the parking lot. Into the open air. But the open air was not open. The coconut grove surrounded the parking lot on 3 sides, and in the darkness between the trees, Elena could see them. Shapes. Dozens of them, standing in the grove, motionless, arranged in a pattern that she recognized from somewhere deep in her memory. A pattern that tugged at something primal, something ancestral, something that predated thought. They were not human shapes. They were close. Close enough to fool the eye at a distance, but up close, in the flickering light of Jake's camera, which he had somehow retrieved and was still recording. Up close they were wrong. The proportions were off. The limbs were too long. The heads were too large. And they had no faces. Where faces should have been, there was only smooth, dark surface. Like stone, like volcanic rock worn smooth by centuries of rain. The fence, Elena said. Go. They ran for the fence. The gap was still there. Jake went through first, then Marcus. Elena was last. She squeezed through the bent chain link, feeling the metal scrape against her back, tearing her shirt, drawing a thin line of fire across her skin. She stumbled onto the highway shoulder and fell to her hands and knees on the asphalt. Behind her, from inside the fence, the sound rose again. The humming, the frequency Marcus had been hearing since they arrived on the island. But now it was audible. Now it was loud. It pulsed through the ground beneath her hands. It vibrated in the pavement. It filled the air like a living thing, rising and falling with a rhythm that was too regular to be natural and too alien to be mechanical. And then it stopped. All at once. Like a door slamming shut, the normal sounds of the night returned. Frogs, insects, the distant crash of surf, the wind in the palms. The world came back. Reality reassembled itself around them, piece by piece, like a broken mirror slowly putting itself back together. Elena sat on the side of the highway and shook, not from the cold, though the cold was still fading from her bones. She shook because her body did not know what else to do. The adrenaline had nowhere to go. The fear had nowhere to go. The grief, the terrible, overwhelming grief that had been ripped open inside her like a wound that had never properly healed, that had nowhere to go either. Jake sat beside her. He did not speak. He put his hand on her shoulder and left it there. His hand was trembling too. Marcus was standing. He was facing the resort. His headphones were around his neck, and he was staring at the dark mass of the buildings beyond the fence with an expression that Elena could not read. Not fear. Not relief. Something else. Something that looked almost like mourning. We need to go, Jake said finally. They went. The drive back to the hotel took 10 minutes. Nobody spoke. Elena drove. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but her mind was not. Images kept flashing behind her eyes. The room. The boy on the bed. Daniel's face. The shape in the darkness. The faceless figures in the grove. The key hanging in the pigeonhole. Room 14. They pulled into the hotel parking lot at 2047 in the morning. Elena parked the Jeep but did not turn off the engine. She sat there, listening to the idle, staring through the windshield at the hotel lobby, which was lit with warm yellow light and looked so normal, so safe, so completely mundane that it almost made her cry. I am going back, she said. Jake looked at her. No, he said. No, you are not. I need to talk to William Kilaha, the groundskeeper. He worked there for 24 years. He knows what is in there. He knows what they are. And I need to understand what just happened to us. What happened to us is we went somewhere we should not have gone, and we saw things that we cannot explain, and now we are going to get on a plane tomorrow and go home and pretend this never happened, Jake said. His voice was rising, not anger, panic. Elena, that thing in the room, that thing pretending to be your brother, it almost got you. If I had not pulled you back, I know, she said. Do you? Because you were walking toward it. You were walking right into it. Your eyes were open and you were smiling, Elena. You were smiling. Elena, you were happy, like you were going home. She did not respond to that. She could not. Because he was right. In that moment, standing in the doorway of room 14, looking at the boy on the bed, she had been happy. For the first time in 6 years, the hollow space inside her had been filled. The silence where Daniel's voice used to be had been replaced by his face, his smile, his presence, and it had felt so real, so right, so completely and perfectly true that she would have done anything to stay in that feeling. Anything. That was what scared her most. Not the shapes in the grove, not the sound, not the impossible cold or the doors that closed by themselves or the hallway that stretched beyond its own dimensions. What scared her most was how easy it had been, how willingly she had walked toward it, how ready she had been to let go. And that meant it knew her. Whatever lived in that land, whatever ancient, nameless thing had been disturbed by the resort and reclaimed the ruins after the hurricane, it knew her. It had reached into her mind and found the one thing she wanted more than anything else in the world, and it had offered it to her, like bait on a hook. The hook, the one she had been feeling since before they arrived. The pull in her chest. It had been there the whole time. Since Los Angeles. Since the night she first saw the photograph of the resort, the shape in the hallway. The figure at the end of the corridor. It had not been a trick of the light. It had been an invitation. She turned off the engine. "I am going to talk to William Kilaha in the morning," she said. "Then we will leave." Jake stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, got out of the Jeep, and went to his room without another word. Marcus lingered. He was standing outside the Jeep, his equipment bag over his shoulder, looking up at the sky. The clouds had parted slightly and a few stars were visible through the gap. "Marcus," Elena said. He looked at her. "What did you hear? In your headphones? Right before you screamed. What did they say?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. The night sounds of Kauai filled the space between them. Frogs, wind, the faraway ocean. "They said a name," he said finally. Over and over, 1,000 voices saying one name. "What name?" He looked at her, and his eyes were full of something she had never seen in them before. Pity. Deep, heavy pity. "Yours," he said. Then he walked inside. Helena did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed with the lights on and her shoes still tied and waited for the sun to come up. And at 6 in the morning, when the first gray light began to creep through the curtains, she picked up her phone and called Mahina Kilaha. Mahina did not answer. Elena called again. And again. On the fourth try, Mahina picked up. "I told you not to call," she said. "I went inside the resort last night," Elena said. Silence. A long, long silence. Then Mahina said, "Are you all right?" "No." Another silence. Elena could hear something in the background. A voice. Old. Male. Faint. Saying something she could not make out. "My grandfather wants to talk to you," Mahina said. There was a note in her voice that had not been there before. Not warmth exactly, but something close. Something like recognition, like she had been waiting for this call without knowing she was waiting for it. "Can I come to you?" Elena asked. Mahina gave her an address. Elena drove alone. She did not wake Jake or Marcus. This was something she needed to do by herself. She followed the directions to a small house in the hills above Wailoa, a single-story wooden structure surrounded by fruit trees and flowering hedges. A dog slept on the porch. Chickens wandered in the yard. The air smelled like cooking rice and coffee. Mahina met her at the door. She was younger than Elena had expected. Maybe 25. She had her grandfather's eyes, dark and deep-set, the kind of eyes that looked like they were always seeing something beyond the surface of things. She led Elena through the house to a back room, and there, sitting in a recliner by the window, wrapped in a thin blanket despite the warmth, was William Kilaha. He was small, shrunken by age. His skin was deeply lined and his hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were spotted and thin. But his eyes were sharp, sharper than anyone's Elena had ever met. They fixed on her the moment she walked in, and they did not let go. "You went in," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." "At night?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. His jaw worked back and forth, as if he were chewing on something. Then he pointed to a chair beside the window. "Sit." Elena sat. For a long time, William did not speak. He looked out the window at the trees in his yard, at the sky, at something that might have been the distant line of the ocean, visible through a gap in the hills, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured, each word placed with the care of someone who had been thinking about what to say for a very long time. "I worked at the Coco Palms for 24 years, he said. "I was the groundskeeper. I took care of the coconut grove. 2,000 trees. I knew every one of them. I knew which ones were healthy and which ones were sick. I knew which ones fruited early and which ones fruited late. I knew which ones the birds liked and which ones they avoided." He paused. "And I knew which ones were different." Elena leaned forward. "Different how?" "There were 7 trees in the grove that were older than the others. Much older. The other palms were maybe 100 years old, 200 at most. But these 7, they were ancient. You could tell by the trunk, the rings, the way the bark had hardened into something that was almost like stone. Those 7 trees were planted in a pattern. A circle, and the old Hawaiians, the real old ones, the ones who remembered the old ways. They said those 7 trees marked a boundary. A boundary between what? William looked at her. Between this side and the other side. He let that hang in the air for a moment. When the resort was built, 3 of those 7 trees were cut down. They were in the way. They were where the developers wanted to put the swimming pool. So they cut them down and poured concrete over the stumps. And that night, 3 of the construction workers got sick. Not regular sick. They started hearing things, seeing things. One of them walked into the ocean at midnight and had to be pulled out by a fisherman. He said someone had been calling him from the water. He said a woman was standing in the waves, and she was singing, and he could not stop walking toward her. Elena's hands were cold. In a warm morning light, in the small safe house, her hands were ice cold. They broke the circle, William said. The 7 trees were like a fence, a gate. They kept certain things contained, certain things that had been living in that land since before the Hawaiians, since before anyone. Things that the old people understood and respected and maintained a relationship with. When the circle was broken, those things got out. Not all at once. Slowly, over the years. The resort was full of them. They moved through the walls, to the floors, to the plumbing. You could hear them at night if you listened. If you were quiet enough and still enough, you could hear them breathing inside the walls. He turned his head and looked at Elena, directly at her, into her. But that is not the worst part, he said. The worst part is what they do. They do not hurt you, not with their hands. They do not touch you. They reach inside you and find the thing you have lost, the person you have lost, and they show it to you. They make it real. So real you can see it, hear it, smell it, touch it, and then they invite you to stay. They open a door, and behind that door is the person you love most, the person you would give anything to see again, and all you have to do is walk through. His voice dropped to a whisper, and if you walk through, you do not come back. The room was very quiet. Elena could hear the dog shifting on the porch outside. She could hear the chickens in the yard. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, fast and steady and loud. "What are they?" she asked. William shook his head. "They do not have a name, not in English, not in Hawaiian. The old people had a word for them, but it was not really a name. It was more like a description. It meant something like the ones who remember. Because that is what they do. They remember everything. Every person who ever stood on that land, every feeling, every grief, every love, every loss. They absorb it, they keep it, and they use it." He looked down at his hands. "I lost my wife in 1985. Cancer. I loved her more than anything in this world, and 3 days after she died, I was working in the grove at sunset, and I saw her, standing between the palms, wearing the yellow dress she wore on our wedding day, and she was smiling at me, and she held out her hand." His voice broke. For the first time, the careful, measured steadiness fractured, and Elena saw the old man beneath it. The grieving man, the haunted man, the man who had been carrying this for decades. "I almost went to her," he whispered. "I took 3 steps before I stopped. 3 steps. I was that close. And the only reason I stopped was because a myna bird landed on my shoulder and screamed in my ear. Screamed like it was trying to wake me up from a dream. And when I blinked, she was gone, and the grove was dark, and I was standing at the edge of the circle, 3 feet from where the concrete covered the stumps, 3 feet from the boundary." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I never went back into the grove after dark. Not once in the 7 years before the hurricane. And when the hurricane came and destroyed the resort, I thought it was over. I thought the land was taking itself back, healing itself, closing the door." He looked at Elena. "But the door is still open," he said. "The 3 stumps are still under the concrete. The circle is still broken, and they are still there, waiting, remembering, learning, getting better at it, getting better at looking like the people we have lost." He reached over and put his hand on Elena's arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "What did they show you?" he asked. Elena told him. She told him about Daniel, about the lullaby, about room 14 and the boy on the bed. She told him everything, and by the time she finished, she was crying, not the controlled, suppressed crying of someone trying to keep it together. Real crying, the kind that comes from a place so deep inside you that you did not even know it was there until it broke open. William held her hand and let her cry. And when she was done, when the tears had run out and she was sitting in the chair with swollen eyes and an empty chest, he said one more thing. "You need to leave this island today," he said, "and you must never come back to that resort, not for any reason, not for any story, because it knows you now. It has your grief. It has your brother's face, and it will use it every night for the rest of your life. It will try to pull you back, in your dreams, in your thoughts. In the quiet moments when you are alone and missing him, you will feel it, the pull, the hook, and you must not follow it. You must let him go. You must let your brother go, not because he is gone, but because what is wearing his face is not him." Elena left William Keelaha's house at 8:30 that morning. She drove back to the hotel. She woke Jake and Marcus. She told them they were leaving. She did not explain. She did not need to. They packed in 15 minutes and were at the airport by 10. Their flight was not until the evening. They sat in the terminal for 7 hours. Nobody spoke much. Jake ate a sandwich from a vending machine. Marcus sat with his eyes closed, his headphones in his bag, untouched. Elena stared out the window at the runway, at the green mountains beyond it, at the clouds moving slowly across the sky. At one point, Jake asked her what William had said. She told him. Jake was quiet for a while. Then he said, "So what do we do with the footage?" Elena thought about it. "We tell the story," she said. "We tell people what that place is. We tell them why they should not go in. We owe it to them." They boarded the plane at 6:15 p.m. The flight took off at 6:45. As the plane climbed over the coast of Kauai, Elena looked out the window. She could see the eastern shore below, the Wallowa River, dark and winding, the coconut grove, a thick cluster of palms stretching along the coast, and in the center of it, just barely visible, the gray outlines of the Coco Palms Resort. From the air, it looked small. It looked like nothing. A few broken buildings being swallowed by the jungle, forgotten, abandoned. But as the plane banked and the island began to shrink beneath her, Elena saw something that she never told anyone about. Not Jake, not Marcus, not the viewers who would eventually watch the documentary she pieced together from the footage. She kept it to herself because she did not know how to say it. She did not know what words to use. In a coconut grove among the palms, she saw a light. A single point of light, warm and golden, like a torch being lit. And then another. And another. One by one, lights appeared throughout the grove, following a path, tracing a pattern that she recognized. A circle, 7 points of light arranged in a perfect circle, with one gap, one dark space where a light should have been but was not. And in that dark space, standing perfectly still, looking up at the plane, was a boy. She could not see his face from that altitude. She knew that. It was impossible. The plane was too high. The distance was too great. She could not possibly make out the features of a person standing on the ground below. But she knew who it was, and he was waving goodbye. Elena pressed her hand against the window. The glass was cold against her palm, and she held it there, watching, until the island disappeared beneath the clouds, and there was nothing left to see. She landed in Los Angeles at 11 p.m. Pacific time. She drove home. She unlocked her apartment. She walked in and dropped her bag on the floor and stood in the dark for a long time. Then she turned on every light in the apartment, every single one, and she sat on the couch with her phone in her hand and scrolled through old photographs until she found the one she was looking for. Daniel, at 17, standing on a beach, squinting into the sun, grinning, his hair damp and messy from the water, her arm around his shoulders just visible at the edge of the frame. She looked at the photo for a long time, and then, for the first time in 6 years, she said it out loud. "Goodbye, Danny." The word sat in the air of her empty apartment, small and fragile and enormous, and somewhere 3,000 miles away on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in a ruined resort that had not had a living guest in nearly 3 decades, a door closed, softly, quietly, Room 14, and the grove was still. But Elena was wrong about one thing. William had told her the pull would come at night, in dreams, in quiet moments. He said it would try to bring her back. What he did not tell her, what he maybe did not know, was that the pull was not just for her. 3 weeks after they returned to Los Angeles, Marcus Cole called Elena at 2 in the morning. She almost did not answer. She had been sleeping, finally, for the first time in days, a dreamless, heavy sleep that felt like mercy. She answered on the fourth ring. Marcus? Static, a long hiss of white noise, and underneath it, barely audible, a sound. Low, rhythmic, the frequency. Marcus, are you there? His voice came through, faint, distorted, as if he were speaking from very far away, or from underwater. I can hear them, Elena, he said. I can still hear them. They followed me home. They are in the walls of my apartment. They are in the pipes. They are in the wiring. I can hear them when I close my eyes. I can hear them when I open them. They are always there. They are always speaking, and they are saying my name now too. Marcus, listen to me. Where are you? Are you at home? Static. Marcus, I am going back, he said. I have to go back. They have something of mine, something I lost a long time ago, and they are keeping it for me, and all I have to do is walk through the door. The line went dead. Elena called him back. No answer. She called Jake. Jake answered on the second ring, groggy and confused. Marcus just called me, Elena said. He said he is going back, to Kauai, to the resort. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said a word that Elena felt in her bones. When? She checked Marcus's social media. His last post was 3 hours earlier. A photograph of a boarding pass. Destination, Lihu, Kauai. He was already on his way. Elena called the airline. She called the police on Kauai. She called Mahina Kaloha. She called everyone she could think of. She stayed up all night making calls, sending messages, trying to reach someone, anyone, who could stop Marcus from going back to the Coco Palms Resort. Nobody stopped him. Marcus Cole landed in Lihue at 7 a.m. Hawaiian time on June 28, 2019. His rental car was found later that day, parked on the shoulder of Kuhio Highway, 200 yards south of the resort. The keys were on the driver's seat. His phone was on the dashboard. His audio equipment was in the back, neatly packed, except for one item. His headphones were missing. A search was conducted. The police walked the perimeter of the resort. They checked the fence. They found the gap in the chain link. They went inside. They did not find Marcus. They found his headphones. They were hanging on a hook behind the front desk of the lobby, in the pigeonhole that had once held the key to room 14. The key was gone. Marcus Cole was never found. He was reported missing. The investigation turned up nothing. No evidence of foul play. No evidence of anything. He simply walked into the Coco Palms Resort and did not walk out. The case remains open. Elena Marsh published her documentary 7 months later. It ran 42 minutes. She narrated it herself. She included the footage from that night, the hallway, the doors, the lobby. She did not include the footage of room 14. She could not bring herself to watch it. She sent the file to Jake and asked him to watch it for her. Jake watched it, and when Elena asked him what he saw, he was quiet for a long time. There is nothing there, he said. No room, no bed, no boy. Just you, standing in a doorway, smiling at an empty room. He paused. But Elena, your shadow, in the footage. Your shadow is not right. Everyone else's shadow falls behind them, away from the light. Your shadow falls forward, toward the room, like it was reaching for something. Elena never watched the footage. She deleted it. She still lives in Los Angeles. She still makes documentaries. She has never gone back to Hawaii. She never will, but every night, just before she falls asleep, she hears it. Faint, distant, almost below the threshold of hearing, a lullaby. And every night, she does not follow it, but every night it gets a little louder.